Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here for our second webinar. I was really excited to see all of your wonderful submissions. They're absolutely incredible, so keep them coming. Some of you only managed, as Kathleen was mentioning, only briefly managed to see me last week as we experienced some unfortunate tech troubles. This is unfortunately very normal in the Zoom room world, as I saw so many of you, our participants, also experience the very same unfortunate thing. Well, moving forward, I would like to welcome the incredible Eric Lane. Eric reminded me that he and I pretty much finally met each other probably about 6 years ago. And although I had followed his work for many years before that, and as is often in the world of post-production, it's a small world and we share many mutual friends. Eric is a designer, a VFX supervisor, and an architect. He has an incredibly interesting career path in the world of post-production, and I'm really excited for him to share it with you. I'm eager for him to share his story, particularly off the back of all of us having discussed the exciting world of concept design, modeling, and texturing this week. I'll soon allow him to introduce himself, as well as talk about how his brilliant career has evolved over the past years. Before that, though, I really would like to thank each and every one of you for showing up and for being present and for joining us. It's really important that you're all here, and I wanted to acknowledge how special this space is for all of us, so thank you. All right, Eric, I'd love for you to share your story on how you became the incredibly talented artist that you are, and I'll soon segue into a few questions of my own, after which we will offer up the space for you to ask your questions as participants.
All right, hey everybody, can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, cool. Let me make sure you guys can see me as well. Okay, hey, I'm Eric Lane. I have known Kat for a long time. Thank you very much for that introduction. I've worked with a few of you guys before. I'm actually a VFX supervisor at the studio called Hornet. We are a small kind of like director's rep and then a production company here in New York City. And I've been there for about 3.5 years, ever since I actually left the last place that I was working, which was the mill, where I met Kat, actually. So that was a long time ago at this point, but it seems like it was just yesterday. Me and Kat go way back, and it's a very small industry when you start working in it, so you get to know everybody really quickly, and it's a lot of fun. But for me, I guess I'll try and keep it as brief as I possibly can, but I can talk really quickly a little bit about my upbringing and then how I got into this industry. And I'm going to just share my screen real fast just so you guys can see what I'm looking at. Let's see. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of run through this as we go. But yeah, so basically I started out as an architect. When I was young, I wanted to be an architect. I thought architecture was a really interesting profession. My initial goal in life was to actually do comic book illustration. I was huge into Spider-Man and Batman back in the day, so those are the things that really kind of moved me. And I, at some point, steered away from that to become a little bit more professional and try to attain some type of professionalism through the world of architecture. Architecture is an awesome profession because you do learn a huge amount of everything. You become very much a Renaissance artist, thinker, and designer, which I think is helpful now. It's led me into a place of really understanding so much more of this industry and how I operate in it than I would if I just had went through the traditional film VFX pipeline that a lot of the students that we hire do. But I guess what I would say is right off the bat, like I initially started out, I went to Tuskegee University in Alabama. I grew up in New Mexico and California, went to Tuskegee to get my bachelor's degree in architecture in Alabama, and then graduated, worked as an architect for about 6.5 years before coming to New York, at which point I decided to change my career. I actually came here for school, a second degree in architecture, believe it or not, and decided at that point to, as soon as I graduated, with my master's, I decided to turn my back on architecture to some degree and focus on a more creative profession that's less bureaucratic. Architecture is a very strict kind of profession, and what I felt in the industry was that I wouldn't be able to be as creative as I wanted to be. So with that being said, I'll kind of just start digging through some of these slides that I have. This is an initial kind of like just frame of what I've, how I kind of meld architecture and what I'm doing now to some degree. This was just playing around. I still do a lot of architectural design. I actually am in the process of helping some family design a house in Mexico right now, which is a lot of fun, but I still heavily am involved in architecture, and I still really appreciate the profession and what I've taken from it, but it's just something that I as a profession, I'm not doing, but I do investigate the idea of spatial design consistently and always. So these are just three renders, essentially, just looking at ways to kind of demonstrate some type of space. And this was done very quickly, but at this point, rather than showing you guys a giant corporate office building that I had worked on when I was an architect, I figured it'd be more interesting to kind of just convey some very simplified spatial designs. And I have a huge, catalog of visual images like this that I've done over the years, but it's just kind of fun to kind of delve back into this every now and then. And I think the world of architecture and the world of motion design and VFX are converging into one. You have programs like Unreal, which uses all of these tool sets, both visual development, architectural design, spatial design, and then also like game-centric VFX, explosions, playing video games is becoming very real now. So all these things are literally turning into one thing, especially when you think of toolkits like something like Unreal, which some of you guys might be interested in. If you don't know about it and you play video games, you definitely already know how it operates, because video games are essentially on the same level. So yeah, that's kind of the entryway into the world of visual development for me, came through architecture. This is something I did recently. I'll show you guys a video of this in a second, but this was a small little project I did with a bunch of designer chairs that I downloaded from a website called Design Connected. And in this case, I just took a bunch of chairs and animated them and made them make a shape, essentially. Let me see if I can actually show you guys this really quick while we're here. I can kind of just go through it. Let's just make sure I have it. There we go. I think this is it. Yeah. So let me know if you guys can see this. 1 second. Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, we're good, Eric. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So this was just really like, honestly, I had like a weekend day where I was like, I'm gonna just take some chairs and animate them, and I wanted to make them kind of just to make the shape, essentially. So I added some audio and did this whole process. It's just a really quick loop for Instagram, basically. That's the interesting world that we live in now, is like people just make stuff for Instagram. It's a 15-second loop, it's a 30-second loop, 3 seconds, it doesn't matter. If you can make something and post it on Instagram, I think it's really, really, we have so much leverage right now as artists and makers that you can just put something out there and then have people look at it, give you some feedback if you want, and then post it on Instagram, and it's there, it's in your grid, and then it's gone in 2 months. You don't think about it, but it's just a really cool way to kind of work. And that's one thing I appreciate about this new era and this new way of being really prolific without having to worry about being so professional. I'm still a part of this old era where I feel like I need to have professionalism in everything I do. But what I really appreciate about what's happening now is just you have so much information you can put out there, and it's great to see kids just kind of throwing art at the wall, and then they're just on to the next one. So anyway, yeah, this is kind of like where the motion design stuff that I'm kind of getting into now is kind of playing in. These are just some really quick random tests that I did, just rendering stuff in Maya and Octane, things like that. This is going back a little bit to the world of illustration that I was really interested in when I was much younger, although I did these more recently. But I have always had the ability to draw to some degree. I'm not great with gesture. I can do gesture drawings in person. If you guys don't know what that is, gesture drawings are just when you have a live subject that you're drawing in a figure with a group of people, and you all have different angles of the pose. But It's a great thing to kind of like familiarize yourself with how the human body and the human form works. If some of you guys are really interested in getting into character design, these are things that I would stress: buying a gesture drawing book, and then going out to subways and on the subway, you know, in a park, wherever you can, just quickly giving yourself 30 seconds to draw somebody. That's what this one on the top left was just a really simple capture of an image that I saw online of a rioter running away from police in the Middle East somewhere. And I thought it was really interesting, but it's just how could I quickly drew this. It was not, well, maybe spent like an hour and a half on this. I guess it's not quick for some people. I'm not a fast illustrator, but I do appreciate the process. So this one took a little bit longer. It's just this was a shipbreaker in Bangladesh that I saw on Nat Geo that I wanted to kind of like capture his likeness and then put it, you know, take it off of the photo and just kind of use it as an image. I thought it was really interesting. This is a woman who was a model that I saw some years ago, and I just thought she had an interesting face, so I decided to kind of cartoonize her to some degree and you know, add some kind of like stylization to her look. And then this is obviously another writer that I found really interesting. It's funny because we live in a world right now that is kind of like pretty on par with what's happening right now in this art. But yeah, these are things that I was doing for a while, and I really still, part of me still wants to be that comic book artist or that illustrator that I never got to be. So I investigated and play with it sometimes in my spare time, although it's not something I'm doing at the moment. One other thing that I really, really took on board as a interesting way to kind of understand my eye was photography. And photography is one of the most important ways to understand space, to familiarize yourself with the golden ratio. Nature in and of itself is the best example of the golden ratio. If you guys don't know what that is, I would suggest looking up the golden ratio because it's probably the single most important rule, natural law that we have to create harmony in space. So one thing that I like about photography is with the camera, the world is already built. You just get to go out there and shoot something, whether it's a person, a building, or an environment, or a product, or anything. It's a great way to kind of just really see how things have already been created for you and how you should try to aim to then replicate those things in space in your art. I went on a trip to Iceland a couple years ago, and I did the entire country. I drove around the entire country. I went by myself. I had a tent and a sleeping bag, and I literally camped the entire way. This is something I actually have also introduced into my life, which is escaping into the wilderness and not knowing if I'll come back. And that's a very real statement because I've been on the precipice of many bad things in different scenarios, but it's something that does make me feel very much alive at this point, especially when you live in a place like New York City. This is some other photography that I have taken while I lived in New York. This is obviously we all know where this is. Just things that I see around the city, just from sunsets to sunrise, people playing handball, you know, kids walking down the street. There's just visual interest everywhere, and I think as artists and creatives, you have to really open your eyes to the world around you to capture it. I think there's so much more for me personally in my journey as an artist to learn and take away from. And I think it's important to always have an open eye to these things and to expose yourself to new ways of thinking. A little bit more photography. This is some Iceland stuff. I went to Death Valley, did the same thing. This is the top right. Iceland is a phenomenal place. It feels like you're on another planet. And if you guys ever get a chance to get out there, I would take that trip. So yeah, that kind of gets us into the part of in advertising, essentially. What I'm showing you here is one of the most exciting projects I did at the mill. When Kat was there, me and Kat were there. It was a fun spot, but this was a commercial we did for Call of Duty at the time, and it was really interesting. I think I kind of segued into this really quickly, but this was basically just everything that I kind of wanted to do. At that point, I kind of had this idea that I would want to work in film to some degree, maybe work on some Avengers things or something like that. But now I've kind of evolved out of that mentality where I see the limitations of working in that capacity. But what I'll say is this project was a fun project because it was literally taking all those elements from the game world, the film world, you know, high-end VFX, live action footage and merging it all together. And this project for me was just a lot of fun to kind of escape into that. So what I'll show you is the actual commercial, then I'll show you the biggest portion of the commercial that I contributed to. You guys can see this, I'll just play it down.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're sharing this spot, Eric. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's funny because this. I'll tell you guys the story. This before you show it. This spot didn't actually air, unfortunately, because of some other issues. But it was just we were all devastated because it didn't air because we put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And then you know, it's just that's how it goes in the industry. Sometimes you just do all this work and it never sees light of day. But that being said, I'll just play it down.
Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. All the sounds of the earth are like music. A breeze is so busy, you don't miss a tree. And the old weeping willow is laughing at me. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way.
Yeah, so that's the spot in its entirety, and that was a huge amount of work for us as a team. Many different hands in this project, everything from people doing character modeling to matte paintings to urban design and layout was one of the things I contributed to, all the way to camera tracking. So many different hands involved in this project, and all of these roles have evolved over the years, but they all still tend to create the same goal. The goal is the same at the end. It's just how we're kind of showing it. A lot of this stuff is getting into the world of real time, that being things like Unreal, Unity, but the process to create these things still relatively remains the same. So I'll show you guys a quick little snippet of what the biggest portion of the spot that I contributed to, and that's the last sequence, this last shot here. So I'll play this down a couple times. So that's like a pretty quick little time lapse of 68 versions, essentially, of progress from start to finish. And what you're seeing in the very beginning here is the live action footage from a drone that was taken on set to actually capture this neighborhood. So we basically, what you see in the very beginning here, this was I forgot where, this was shot in Prague, actually.
Yes.
So this is shot in Prague, and this is block housing in Prague. And just a pretty standard drone running down a residential neighborhood. And then our goal and our task as the post house in this specific case was to envision and create this world that, you know, nobody really understood how it would exist. So right off the bat, you can see here, I started out with taking these existing block housing structures here and trying to match them exactly as they were, as you can see. So this is all CG now. And then I've created an entire environment in the background with a huge amount of assets that were both purchased and also modeled, creating a central courtyard to kind of invite this kind of chaos that we would see from the actual video game. And then essentially just go through the laborious task of refining and iterating over and over and over again for about maybe a month and a half, 2 months we had to work on this. I'll play it down one more time so you guys can kind of get an idea.
And Eric, and I must say that in the Q&A, I'm getting a lot of really positive remarks from the participants. Everyone's pretty excited about what you're showing, so please keep it coming.
Awesome, cool. I mean, this is one of the coolest projects I did. A lot of the stuff that I do now isn't so VFX centric, and there's a reason to a degree for that, but it's like, it's everything. It's cool because you can work in so many different capacities in this industry. The VFX side is one side of it. There's a whole other design side that I find interesting as well. but yeah, so this was a fun project, and I'll just play it down one more time so you can see it. But this is one of those projects where I was like, it was one of the better and more fun projects I've worked on in this industry. And if you guys can't tell, this was for Call of Duty. Yeah, so that's one of the bigger ones. I'll go back to my slide sheet here. This was another fun project I did actually right about the time I think that I left working at the mill. And this was a project called Arla, which was a lot of fun actually. Again, this is another one. This project didn't air, unfortunately, because as soon as we launched the campaign, another company sued this company and gave them a cease and desist, which goes into some crazy matters. But it was basically, it was like a defamation case because we were making fun of a hormone. Anyway, I'll play this one down. This is a really fun project, and it was super easy to do, which is rare.
REST has razor-sharp horns. It's so tall that it could eat clouds. You may want to pet it, but the fur is electric. And then it starts laughing.
Actually, RBST is an artificial growth hormone given to some cows, but not the cows that make Arla cheese. No added hormones, no weird stuff. Arla, live unprocessed.
Yeah, so this one was a lot of fun. Like I said, it was a really relatively simple job to create, but it was cool because in the beginning of this campaign, we had two kids draw their vision of what like these two different hormones would be. So that's her monster that she actually drew. And then our job was to take and work with her as a designer and take her monster and then turn it into a real monster, which was the character that you see here. That's like our version of what she created. So this was a fun project because we A, got to work with kids, and then B, got to make their vision become a reality on screen. The overall execution of this project was relatively simple. It's just that this was an exciting little project to do and be a part of as a team. So that was a nice one. And then basically, because the makers of RBST were offended that we made a commercial where we made their hormone look bad, they decided to can it. That's the world that we live in. So it's hard. Sometimes you work on something that's so fun and so amazing, and then just can't see the light of day.
You highlight. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you go ahead.
You highlight a very harsh reality of our industry, in that
yeah.
no matter what, and how exciting a project is, how fun it is, how adorable it is, this project is, there are politics involved that, will can the project, and then eventually you can't share that work.
Yep, it happens quite often. If you believe it or not, it happens more than it should. Especially with like the bigger tech companies who have a lot of money to blow, they'll pay someone to do something, a lot of money, and then they'll just say, oh, we just wanted to see what it looked like, we're not going to run it. It happens a lot. So this was a bigger project that I worked on, again, at the mill. This was a Super Bowl commercial for the Schick Hydro Razor. I'll show you guys this one. My role on this project was essentially doing look dev and character development for this enemy character. I will play this down for you guys. Some of you may have seen it, some maybe not. There might not be audio on this one.
And actually, I remember this project very well when I was helping to schedule it, because originally this project wasn't a Super Bowl spot to begin with at first.
Right. They liked it. They wanted to pitch it as. I remember that.
You had to expedite schedule.
Yeah. So essentially, like, my role in this project actually was really looking at this character, this specific character, the enemy character, and going through the process of giving him texture and finalizing his look, essentially. So there was basically what we call in the industry look development or surfacing. And in that capacity, you're not necessarily doing the model. You might be doing a little bit of modeling on it, but you're doing mostly, you're solving the way it's going to look on camera, essentially. So that means how do the textures look more metal? What looks like rubber. And I'll show you one frame of this that I can kind of share. But this is a turntable of the character, not in its final posing, obviously, but just to kind of show how the textures would work on this character.
Seeing in the chat that a lot of our participants have seen this commercial. So.
Oh, cool, awesome, yeah. This one didn't. This one did air, luckily. But this was a fun project. This was also like one of the projects I really appreciated working on at the mill. But I mean, it was just really fun to go in here, and I hand painted pretty much everything on this character in a program called Mari. And by hand painting, I mean like I'm digitally painting all this scuff and dirt and grime, you know, the rust on the blades, you know, all these little elements. I hand painted it, and it's like, you know, it's just really just to be given the time to kind of create this fun piece of art. Is something that, you know, it's you don't always get the cool jobs. Like I'm doing a job for, you know, a phone company right now. They're not quite as interesting as these other bigger projects. So it's something that, you know, most of the time that you're in this world making art for profit, it's not always going to be a cool project. So that's something you just have to know about. But, you know, when you do get those opportunities, it's fun. I'll close that. I'll go back to my slides here. We're getting through it. I don't have too much more to go. If you guys are getting bored.
When we're looking at this particular project, Diamond Lee actually asked, how long did this project take to complete, or your efforts on this project?
I was on it probably for the majority of the duration of the project, because after I did the character work that I was doing, I was also on the print campaign, and I was also on lighting a couple shots. So that was probably 2 and maybe 3 months, honestly. It might have been 3 months in the end, just because the print campaign ended up lasting longer than the actual spot did.
Right.
So that was it was a condensed schedule. It was really fast for the actual production of the commercial, but the print made it go even longer.
Right.
Yeah. Oops. Okay. So this is a different avenue of the way I've worked in the past, and this is also another project that I really admire in my portfolio, just because it was really fun to be a part of this team and work on this project. The guy that I directed this commercial is a good friend of mine, super talented creator and maker. And he directed this commercial. This is the first time I actually met him. And I just had a wonderful opportunity of being able to kind of just throw my design eye at this and really create a really fun little world. This is a commercial for Mazda, and essentially we just went to town creating these really fun, whimsical environments for this car to drive around in. Everywhere from like snow peaks and city to mountains and desert. It was fun. So my role in this, again, is just basically doing so much of the environment design and modeling. And also I did the family in this car and this dog, modeling all these characters, designing them, and just having everything work. But just so much of this became such an illustrative process that we were just basically creating all these backgrounds in CG, and then we had some other people that were painting over the backgrounds in comp, which was a really, really interesting process. And I think it led to some really creative development, and an overall look that I think still holds up. This project's probably 7 or 8 years old now, but it still, in my opinion, it still really holds up. It doesn't feel like it's dated, which is something that you don't get very often in this industry. 3 years go by and the projects typically look like they are from 3 years ago. You know, it's hard. It's one of those things that's difficult to master from a craft perspective. But yeah, this was a fun one. So I you know, these are the kinds of projects that I actually appreciate, and I'm showing you guys under the normal projects that I do from day to day. I'll put it that way.
This is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the illustrative look is absolutely fantastic, and it's such a contrast to what you shared on Gillette, rather.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very different. Like the two worlds are quite different.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see. Hold on.
And while you're looking this up, you're pulling something else up. Sadia was asking, what software did you use for that particular project?
Okay, so everything that I've shown you so far has been Maya, ZBrush, Mari for texturing. Maya is the overall overarching project that we use for most of the work that we're doing that goes into a team-based production. Only because it's a collaborative software and it's very open-ended for pipeline. So that's one reason we use Maya quite extensively. Is it my favorite application? Probably not, but it is a successful tool to correlate artists together. This is a more current project that I worked on a couple of years ago. This is where I am now at Hornet. We did a Paper World campaign for the Honda Canada environment team. And this was just some stills from the actual videos. I'll play them down here. Am I good on time? Let me know if I need to hurry this along.
No, please keep going. And just taking note of everyone's questions as well. So.
Okay. So this was a fun project. This is different than the higher end VFX work that I've done. This was actually a little bit more design centric. And this is the kind of work that I really do admire. But maybe just where I'm trying to go with the work that I do is just maybe it's getting a little bit more honed in to bringing architecture and the graphic nature of architecture into the work that I'm creating now. I'll play this down though. Yeah, so that's kind of it. It's like this was a fun. I kind of zoned out looking at these, thinking back to how much work it was to create them. So, this was a fun project. The director is also a good friend of mine, really talented director at Hornet. But the brief was to make a paper world, a paper kind of whimsical world that would sell through the idea of how Honda is impacting the environment through hybrid vehicles and all the other things that they're doing. But yeah, it was like just kind of go to town, making some characters in the stylized world, and then set the world stage behind it and have all these things come together. This is a pretty standard and typical way of working through projects. You have the paper world brief a lot in this industry because I think through a lot of research, it does really connect with people when you're not, when the characterization is cute and it kind of just like you're making these really kind of stylized worlds. It really does help. So I think a lot of these projects come back over and over again, which is fun. They're fun to work on, so it's a good thing. I think it's awesome. But I have worked on quite a few paper world commercials in my career, and they're always like fun and like whimsical and interesting little spots. But in this case, we did 4 of these, and it was a very tight schedule, so it was a lot of work.
And how big was the team on this particular project, Eric?
This one was probably like. It was pretty small. We had like 8 people on this one. It was small. For the amount of work that we did, it was a very small team. It was a big one. Christine Kim actually worked on this. It's a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours. So yeah, we had a solid crew of people.
Definitely had a solid crew. Otavio was actually wondering how long did these 4 projects take to finish?
That was like probably 2.5, 3 months for 4 spots. It was tough. I'm talking like nights and weekends were definitely used on this, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a tough one. So probably like 3 months at the most was spent on this, and for the amount of work that we did, it was a stretch. I'm gonna head on over to another. This is just a slide. I don't have the video to show you only because the video is like 2.5 minutes long. But these are some design frames that I created for this project. It was for it was a nonprofit It was a cancer research company. We were creating a narrative-based film depicting what happens when one little thing goes wrong, that being like a thing like cancer, but how it affects your entire body and how certain drugs can help. But I can't even begin to explain the story behind it because it's just, you have to kind of watch it as it's a 2-minute piece. But it's because it's 2 minutes, I'm not going to show you here, but I wanted to share some of the design frames that I created in this on this project to convey the design intent of the director and help supplement that the team that's working on this from a design perspective, so they know what will be what the aim is and how the look is supposed to be. It's different when you're working as a designer versus a production artist. A production artist, you're typically kind of just solving problems and executing a vision. When you're designing, it's a little bit, you're kind of like trying to solve the issue of how does this thing work with the narrative that's being told? How can we, what is the stylization of this thing? There's a lot of different elements within how we work in different creative capacities in the industry. This was fun though. Now I'm getting into more of my personal work. This is something that's actually very current. This is something I'm working on right now. I kind of just slammed right in here. But this is a character that I'm creating right now that's really trying to push absolute photorealism. It's very much a work in progress, so you're seeing some kind of like whip stage elements here. But this was something I sculpted myself. I designed the character. I did everything on this from scratch, including painting, not painting, but actually sculpting in each and every single pore. Not every single pore, but like as a brush, a pore brush, and then adding little ones where need be. And then setting up a groom and just doing all the ins and outs of creating this character and trying to sell a realistic look of what this character might be in real life. I'm not there yet with the skin tones and the texturing of the skin yet. Like there's some things that are still awry with the realism of it. The skin feels too uniform. I'm still working on the hair, obviously. I'm not sure what I want to do with the hair. I'm open to suggestions. But again, this started out as a study of like North African, like a North African character with scarification from maybe like, Sudan or something. I studied a lot of different like people from that region. The head shape isn't necessarily North African. It's a little bit more standardized, but the overall intent was to kind of just like look at the people there and then figure out ways to kind of take some of that cultural information into this character, and then maybe make him a person that could have been from that region, but then came to some other Western country. But this is one frame. The beard I'm kind of like starting to like, but it still needs some work. There's so much that goes into doing any type of photorealistic 3D character. Some of you guys have probably seen this on websites like ArtStation or ZBrush Central, or if you're not familiar with those, we can definitely send you links to those for creative inspiration. But there's a huge push right now for digital humans. I was approached by a friend who was asking if I could help out in terms of doing digital humans because there aren't any shoots right now. Nobody's going on set because of COVID. So there's a lot of people that are doing 3D scans of faces, and you're kind of taking all that information, recreating it in 3D, and then having like characters, humans, actually act out, but they're basically selling their likeness to a company, their digital likeness. This is a very real sci-fi Black Mirror reality that's coming into place right now. So it's really interesting. But I'm interested in this because I want to stylize and create my own characters. I want to do clothing for this character. I want to do a whole, genre of these characters where I, have 7 or 8 of these that I can kind of just pose and have as like models essentially. And maybe I can start doing clothing. I don't know where this leads, but.
Well, I was blown away when you first shared this with me. It's absolutely exquisite. I'm like really blown away. So
I appreciate it.
And Isis was asking, she's struggled to get the hair right when working within specific softwares, and has mentioned that when they try it, it never looks right. What are some tips or recommendations you might have?
I used to be a huge fan of Yeti, which was an application that wasn't available in the United States for a long time. But now for this character, I ended up using XGen, which is in Maya. It's in Maya and it's free. But I have never used XGen before. This was my first time using XGen, and I was able to get a pretty convincing groom right off the bat. I would say, like, you really just want to find a solid tutorial on YouTube and watch it 10 times, and then literally just start working with a groom. It's like you don't just open the software and just run right into it, but look at what you can find online. And I can share some tutorials that I've found that are really successful. There's a guy named Arvid Schneider, I think is his name. He's really talented, and he So he goes through everything from A to Z in different applications. Phenomenal artist. He's done some groom work in the past, I believe, but there's a lot of really good X-Gen interactive grooming tutorials out there that you can get your hands on to learn how to kind of do this stuff. And I think this world of photorealistic human characters is going to be around for a very long time.
Yeah.
What I did was the hard way because I did it all from scratch. A lot of people now are just doing scans, like 3D scans, and then creating their digital characters that way. That's what you see in video games. If you guys play video games at all, you'll notice all the characters are done in that traditional way of working.
Natalie's wondering too, what is your specific process for mapping out a face or a digital human? Are you inspired at all by real people? Do you take real references?
Yes, 100%. If I could show you guys my contact sheet of reference for this character alone. It's huge. I did so much research, so much visual research as well, just looking at the human face and trying to see how everybody's different. Looking at skulls of African people versus European people versus Asian people, how the skulls of different people changed, how the frontal part of your skull is different on a black person or a person of African descent versus a white person. These are all things that are kind of like, I also bought a couple of books just to kind of look at anatomy, but these are all things that I was working towards for the sculpt part of it. For the texture part of it, that's still something I'm working on right now, but again, it's just really looking at a lot of reference. What the sun does to your skin, what sunspots look like, how skin varies from a person of African descent to a person of European descent. These things are all kind of things that play into how I'm dealing with these characters. These are some kind of like test images, but you can kind of see here, this was before I had the beard on, a little bit sweatier. The eyes weren't quite right. None of this stuff is perfect yet. I'm still very much a work in progress. This was the first lip render that I did that I was like, oh, this actually looks kind of cool, I guess. I have some eye work up here that you can see, and then another kind of like beard render on the right, and then just the initial start of the groom. But this is how the groom looked on day one, where I just had a bunch of guides, and it's just like the hair sticks straight out, and then you have to comb it and curl it and add all the details. So what I would say is find a really good tutorial on grooming. And grooming is such a cheat. You can make really cool stuff really easily with grooms. A big furry thing with just 2 eyeballs, it could be really cool and cute. Put it on some legs and animate it. You have so much opportunity there. The image on the right corner is a zebra sculpt. This is just a sculpt flat out of ZBrush with no render, no light whatsoever. But that's what generates this essentially. This is a personal project for me, and it's still very much a work in progress. And I would like to get it done before the year's over, but I'm so busy. And that's one thing I was going to kind of just call out right now is my reel that was posted on Instagram yesterday. I haven't updated my reel since 2013. So none of the work that I have has been updated since 2013. My website hasn't been updated since 2013. And it's partly due to the fact that I've been booked and working nonstop. And then when I'm not working, I'm trying to be out in the mountains and stepping away from digital media because it's what I do for a living and it's what I do for leisure as well. But building a website and updating my portfolio is something I'm going to try and do this year. But that's why my current online portfolio and presence is so dated. Even my Instagram feed is just photography because I don't have time to even think about portraying the work that I'm doing because it's constantly changing.
Yeah, I have to say that I've had the pleasure of being able to work with you for about 1.5 years or more, and you are one of the busiest, most hardworking artists I've ever known, and so many of our fellow artists who've worked with you and people we mutually know have said only the best things in terms of having worked with you and really having learned so much from having worked with you.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And I think I try to just, be a team player. These are all the things that kind of just make it fun for you and for everybody else. It's just, everybody you meet in this industry is going to circle back around at some point, These are some sculpts that I did over time, like looking at anatomy, looking at stylized characters, more stylized characters, and even just like things that I would sculpt in like 1.5 hours. How can I make something in ZBrush in 1.5 hours look interesting? This started out as an hour sculpt, and it turned into like a couple days because I liked the characterization of this guy. And this is when I was really early in ZBrush back in the day. This character, again, this is my first actual attempt at sculpting a woman's face, which is extremely difficult because I can sculpt a man's face, but sculpting a woman's face proved to be extremely difficult because I just don't understand it. You know, like I know what a man's face looks like, but a woman's face and the intricacies and details of a woman's face are very different. Again, here, more of the same, just some more sculpts and characters. This was the Joker. This was a character that I did a while back that was a lunch crunch, just an hour. And then I just really liked it, and I ended up trying to, I want to turn this into an actual character. I do really like the stylization of it. And then this is just another kind of crazy looking character and another lunch crunch. And that is the end of my slides. So I think, you know, I've covered a pretty large amount of information here, so I'll answer as many questions as I possibly can, if there are any.
Oh, there are quite a few, and as I said to you earlier, a lot of our participants are just celebrating your exceptional work and the wide range of projects that you've shared with all of us. So we really thank you for that. There are quite a lot of questions actually that were asked earlier about, you know, about your background in architecture specifically. Mosel actually asked earlier, how would you say architecture had an influence in your animation career? And is it easy to be able to have both skills in your career today?
Yes, architecture is a really, really good degree it's a really good profession, excuse me, to have, because it does make you, one thing I noticed about architecture is that it makes you want to be a part of everything. If you truly like design, you want to be a part of the creative process in the beginning, and you also want to be a part of the finishing process in the end. What I have now in this industry is a lot of people who don't really want to take part in the creative process. They just want to do the end part. And I think it's important, and one thing that architecture helped me with is just to really appreciate everything from creative start to creative finish. The other thing is, when it comes to spatial awareness and spatial design, that's something that I think has really kind of played a role in how I think about solving problems, whether it be modeling or how light comes into a space and is illuminating a character through just through the spatial awareness. So I think that's kind of like where it is. But really, I think the thing that really is the standout element is just the desire to do more than just come in and light a shot or finish a thing. I wanna own what I'm doing.
Angel was wondering as well earlier, like, do most architects use 3D modeling to create their plans? And is that a requirement when they sort of create these buildings?
Yeah. So architecture right now is all 3D. Like, you want to be using a software called Rhino and another software called Revit. But I learned how to model in 3D in architecture. At Tuskegee, actually, I took my first 3D modeling class. There's a professor there that taught me how to model a rounded cube, which is so easy now, but back then it was rocket science. And I think that experience really informed the rest of my career decisions. But modeling is important for sure.
Expanding upon this, actually, Kimberly just asked, what are some free programs that our participants can look into, or less expensive programs that our participants can look into to make similar designs, like the design with the exercise you shared with the chairs?
Yeah. I would say there are, I don't know if there's any applications that are free necessarily, but there are a lot of student or learning versions that you can get your hands on. And I think software companies are definitely more inclined to help people learn on their platforms right now than ever before. Unreal is free. Unreal is completely free. That's a huge free tool that you can learn right now and literally just have a foothold in the industry, because everybody's trying to learn and utilize Unreal artists right now. That's a huge one. But I would say, like, if you want to learn Maya, I would steer people to learn not just Maya, because Maya turns you into an operator, I think. And it's really hard to be creative in Maya, because you can be. I'm not saying you can't be. I'm just saying that if you're using Maya, you're typically using it to be a part of a team or create like photorealistic characters or something like that. But if you can do that in Cinema 4D, You can do that in 3D Studio Max. You can do that in Houdini. You can do that in any application. Be software agnostic. Don't just pick a software. Try to learn all software. Try to learn how to do what you want to in many different applications.
I'm absolutely aligned with you on that end. So we've spoken a bit about your background in architecture, and now I'd like to migrate to the photography that you've shared. Alison had asked earlier, what camera do you use for these incredible landscape scenes that you've shared with us? But also, what's a really good camera or beginner camera to invest in when you're exploring the world of photography?
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have a Sony A7R II, which is a pretty nice high-end camera. That I bought specifically for VFX supervision and shoots, and I also use it for travel. That camera is really, really good. It's amazing. But I'm going to say this right now. You do not need that camera. Before you even come close to thinking about investing in a camera, you need to look at some of these people that are on Instagram right now that have huge followings, and they're taking photos with an iPhone or a Samsung, because what they're creating on these phones is phenomenal. It's not about the camera, it's about the eye. An iPhone or a Samsung right now has a better megapixel count than like the, really high-end cameras from just 5 years ago. I think before you even think about buying a camera, you need to look at people on Instagram who are literally creating stunning, stunning images with their Samsungs and iPhones. And then you can start getting involved in actually like investing in a Sony or a Nikon or a Canon or whatever you choose, because then you'll understand why you need it. But you have to understand everything from f-stop to shutter speed to all these things. And a lot of these cameras have manual modes within them, these iPhones and Samsungs, where you can start playing with those things. If you do want to just jump in and buy a camera, like you can do that and you can learn and you can just go as you go. But before you do anything, especially if you want to do like landscape or street photography, you need to just go to a blog, go to a website where they talk about it and learn how these people shoot properly. And then you can actually invest. Because I think I did it the opposite way, where I bought the expensive camera, but I did know about camera photography for a long time already. But I did buy a more expensive camera, and then I learned how to use it better as I owned it, But I think if I would have just forced myself to take 6 months of photographs with my iPhone and see if I can get some traction from those in terms of people commenting or like critiquing it and giving me some good feedback, then I think I'd be better off.
Awesome. Olayinka, we've obviously talked a little bit about photography, and Olayinka was wondering, is it harder for you to do a hyper-realistic 3D animation, like the Schick spot that you shared with the robotic razor, or is it harder for you to work on the 2D spot that you shared with that didn't air with the kids?
2D spot was way easier. The Schick spot has so many moving parts, and they're just bigger projects overall because it's a live action shoot that is done by a different team. It's just a huge amount of work because there's so many moving parts. The Schick things, like a Super Bowl commercial with a big budget like that, is going to always be more difficult with more people involved. If you're doing it on your own, it's different because then you're controlling all creative aspects. But typically, it's 2D animation, 3D stylized animation is a little bit easier.
Awesome. Connie asked a very question earlier. Do you ever get upset or disheartened or frustrated when something doesn't come out the way that you wanted it to when you're working on one of these commercials or projects that you just shared with us?
When it comes to my personal work, I have moments where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to work on this anymore because I don't like how it's looking and I don't know how to make it look right, and then I'll just put it off for a little while and then I'll come back to it. There's these really weird moments, and you guys are going to notice as you get further and further into your creative profession. It's hard to kind of like really push yourself to get past your project looking like crap, Like it takes some time, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of just literally forcing it out. And I'm still guilty of that. Like I won't really, I'll just table something until I come back to it later to finish it if I have to.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can see that, and we're always hardest on ourselves as artists, so.
Yeah.
This is kind of a nice segue into Brian's question from earlier, where he asks, how do you combat burnout when you're working on whether it's a personal project or one of these massive projects that you've shared with us? Is there any tips or tricks on sort of maintaining a healthy work-life balance you can share with our participants?
Well, I don't have the best work-life balance, I'll be honest, but my balance does come from travel like this and going to places like Iceland, Alaska, wherever I can travel to. My travel expenses are so cheap because I always go and I go camping, so I'm not paying for anything but the flight out and the flight back, and then sometimes I rent a car. But I personally I'm an extremist, so I work really hard for the time that I'm working, and then I literally go off somewhere and I shut everything out in the world and I just focus on nature. I think that's for me the most important thing. And unfortunately, right now, I think I'm going crazy because COVID has kept everybody in, so we're all kind of getting cagey, you know. So I really do need a mental break from digital media.
Yeah, I relate to that 100%, and I'm sure our participants feel the same way. Vicky Dunke was asking earlier, you know, do you, and it's a very interesting question because I can imagine this is something that would be of interest. I mean, do you not get paid if a project that you've worked on is not aired or doesn't work out?
Oh no, we get paid for sure. There's always the payment comes no matter what. If they can the project, then everybody gets paid still, regardless. Like for instance, if we're working for a company like PlayStation in that case, and PlayStation decides that they don't want to air the commercial, they're still going to pay the agency, and the agency is still going to pay us. So that never, and if that happens, then you're getting into a lawsuit situation.
Right. Hassan was wondering, are you currently on a project?
I am, and it's not glorious. We're doing a project for Verizon. It's fun. It's really fun. It's cool. It's actually a really awesome opportunity to kind of like throw my architecture back into the world. But it's not like a Super Bowl commercial. It's essentially just a product, and it's not narratively the most engaging project, but it is a fun opportunity to kind of like deal with some design elements and also bring in some architectural relevance to the project, which is cool. So yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. Amani was asking earlier, do you keep a notepad around you in case you get any ideas? You know,
A what? A pad.
How do you keep yourself contained or inspired throughout the creative process?
I'm gonna be honest. For me, I do have I use OneNote from Microsoft just to take notes and stuff, but Instagram is great for me, not for taking notes, but I use my Instagram in a way that probably not a lot of people do, but I have a huge amount of saved images, and I categorize my saved images based on photography, design, CG, 3D, all these different elements. So I get inspired by C4D, but there is a little bit of a problem with that because you can end up on on Instagram, excuse me, you can end up on there for like an hour just watching and looking at other people's art and liking it, but it's not really helping you make art. Sometimes you have to just shut everybody out and just literally make something on your own without influence.
Yeah, with that said, you know, who or what inspires you? What inspires your creative process?
I'm inspired by many things, from photography to architecture to everything that we just talked about. But it's such a hard question because there's so many different things that move me. Let's see. Right now, I would say these simple graphic design elements I mean, I just got some reference for this artist named Tom Pigeon, who's a really talented graphic designer. And his work is really awesome, and I kind of think of ways to kind of turn that into 3D. Some of the more kind of like classic, like Ray and Charles Eames, that's why that one little chair thing I did was kind of fun, because it deals with architecture and, you know, some of the classic designers in architecture and furniture design. But then I can't even begin to expound on that list because there's just so much, there's so many different people. It's a long list.
Thank you for that. I think, you know, all of our participants are taking notes. like Jessica and Henry both asked earlier, what are some of your favorite projects? What are some of the projects that you've worked on that you're most excited about, that you're most inspired by, where you've maybe learned the most?
As an assortment of the ones in here, there was a Facebook project. There was a Facebook project that I did last year, I guess, a year and a half ago. That was a lot of fun, but it's really long. I didn't want to add it because it would have been very long to watch. But I learned a lot on that one, and it was a very difficult process just in terms of executing it. So yeah, that was a fun one. There's I'm still waiting for the best project. That's why I still I think I still really enjoy this industry, is because I'm waiting for the next really interesting opportunity. You know, I think the best project is still out there. You know, it's like I don't think I've seen it yet. I don't think it's happened yet, which is why I think I still enjoy working the level that I do, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and I absolutely think this is a perfect segue into Miriam's question, which is, what would be a dream project for you to work on? What's been something that you've always aspired to work on that really motivates you?
Okay, that's a good question. Like, they're all good questions, but this one particularly brings up this idea of this company Elastic and this other company Man versus Machine. Both of these companies do such incredible work. Man versus Machine particularly, their work is phenomenal. They have an account with Nike, and the graphic design they're doing for these commercials that's turned into motion design is phenomenal. Those are things that I would like to start transitioning into. I love the character work that I'm doing. These are things that I really they're important to me, because I have this inner ability to kind of like design and sculpt and create a character. But at the same time, the simplification of the work that they're doing on their end for campaigns like Nike is just so inspiring, and it's so graphic and so simplified. It's awesome to see, and I want to start figuring out ways to create work like that, whether it means learning Houdini or really delving deep into Cinema 4D to kind of like think in a different way. I think I've already started doing it. So
yeah, appreciate you sharing that. Irilyn was asking, and this is actually a really important and transparent question. Have you ever had a difficult time in your career, and how did you work through it? Or is there a specific example you can offer? Particularly, I mean, I'm most curious, you know, especially at the more entry level or junior level, you know, was there anything that you found challenging, and how did you work on that?
I'm very much a brute force type of person, so I'll fight through the problem. If that means like finishing out what I'm doing and then taking time off to collect my thoughts, or if it means just hashing it out, any issues that I have right then and there. I'm very straightforward with these things. I try to kind of get to the bottom of it so that it's not pegging me. There are issues that you're always going to have in your head that are going to bother you until you address them head on. So I think for me, I try to problem solve around these issues and come up with a solution so that when I have to make a decision, the solution is already made. Like the results are there. I just have to execute on it. If that makes it, it's kind of a weird way to put it, but yeah, I think that's kind of how I try to think about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really resonates with our participants. Can you take us through maybe a day in the life of your role as a VFX supervisor?
Yeah.
What does that look like? I mean, from my own experience, no day is the same, but
yeah. Well, right now, I wake up and I either come into this room and get on my computer, or our office just opened last week, and I've been going to the office a little bit the last couple of days, but we are open, and I'll basically start by kicking everybody off on the notes that came in from the last day, and talking through that process, and then going through people's work, checking what's been hit, and then doing more call. Right now, it's a lot of calls, but it used to be a little bit more. As a lead, you have less time to be creative and execute actual work. As a artist, as a lighter or a specific type of artist, your time is spent more in the creative process and just kind of like hammering out shots, basically, which is fun. Both are fun, though.
what do you most like about your job?
Um, I like this industry because it's still evolving. It's not, this isn't a classic profession. This is a new industry and it's still evolving. And programs like Unreal and all the things that are happening right now make it even more interesting because you cannot tie this industry down. It's not like it's, this is like the film industry, which has kind of been the same for years. This is different. It's altogether different. And I appreciate that. And I want to know what happens next. I'm eager along with everybody else.
I'm going to totally put you on the spot. What do you most dislike or least like about your job?
Sometimes when you're working on a really crappy project, there are really, really crappy projects, I'll be honest. You're just like, especially as you get a little older, I'm a little older now. You get to those points in your career where you're like, oh my God, this is so whack. This is so bad. Why am I doing this? You have those days. There's definitely those projects. And the cool thing is when you're young, work on all those projects, work on the good ones, the bad ones, take as much experience as you can. And literally, for me, one of the reasons why I really try to, I guess one of the reasons why I've been busy for as long as I have is because I try to put 110% into everything that I do, whether it's a stupid, really, really lame campaign with a bad script, or it's the best project you could ever work on. Both of those projects, if they're paying you to be there, sit in that chair and do the work, then you should be doing the absolute best that you can because your name is attached to that work. They're going to bring you back whether or not you did a good job on the crappy project or a good job on the great project.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. And we're definitely getting older.
Yeah.
I feel that in my bones.
I know.
And with that said, Sanjona is wondering, what keeps you motivated? What keeps all of us motivated?
For me, it's really easy to get option paralysis, especially when you're in this new day and age where we're sown so much information on, TikToks and Instagrams and everything else that's happening, Twitter. It's the things that keep me motivated are probably I try to keep I use Instagram a lot, but I reference it a lot too because it is a new platform in which people are getting exposed to work, But I try to keep my feed on Instagram purely based on art and photography. And I think those things, if I'm out hanging out or something and I randomly open Instagram if I'm out and about and I see like somebody's art and it's like awesome, I'm like, oh, that's inspiring. I want to go home now and actually make my own art. This is dope. I gotta create. I gotta be prolific. I gotta make something.
You highlight Instagram as a reference, and speaking from a recruitment point of view, that's how I often recruit as a recruiter. So I think keeping your Instagrams updated with your artwork is another really great way of sharing your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think Instagram, honestly, it's like a mini portfolio. Like it can be. If you choose to have your Instagram as like your own personal life, that's totally fine. If you are a creative person, it can be leveraged as a portfolio. I don't have a huge following on Instagram. I haven't even really started putting any of my artwork on there. It's all photography basically. And it's like, either way, I know it can be really, really useful, especially for you guys coming out right now to just figure out how to like make your art, tag it. It's so easy to kind of just get some eyes on your work and also get some creative feedback sometimes, that's useful.
Yeah.
So.
With that said, Caroline was asking, should you go by using your entire name or do you recommend using an alias?
I mean, if you have no reason to hide, then use your full name. If you don't, my name is, my tag is yield. It's like my initials and design basically. But I have my name on there. I'm not afraid to show my name. I don't post a whole lot of photos of myself because I'm more of an internal person. But I think if you're looking to be exposed for your work, then you can either be like a Madonna and have a crazy wild name, but then just have everybody know who you are, or you can be who you are and also make dope work. And it's a really personal preference. How you guys want to create your persona online is entirely up to you. All that matters is that you're making the work and showing it.
Exactly. Jaden was wondering, do you ever run out of ideas?
Yeah, all the time. It's unfortunate because you want to, that's the thing about, going to these platforms like Behance. Behance is great, by the way. If you guys don't know Behance is extremely important. So much good work being put on Behance. Portfolios are there, like it's great. But what I was gonna say is, it's really difficult because sometimes you see so much other work out there and it really inspires you, but then when you want to sit down and create something, you don't have an idea of your own because you're just constantly being inspired. So there's definitely something to be said about overexposure to inspiration.
Right.
And it's like, it can be debilitating, honestly. It can be it can really cut you off from creating your own work.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Joehead was wondering, what type of work do you look forward to the most? Is it video games, or do you like working on 2D animation, commercials, something more long form, your personal work?
I would go back to the work done by Man vs. Machine, or even Elastic. More so Man vs. Machine. Or there's another studio, Foam and Zeitgeist. These guys, they do such amazing work. It's so clever. It's so simple. It's not even character based. It's just simplified animation. And that's, I think, where I'm leaning towards right now. I'm super inspired by what's happening in Unreal. If any of you guys have seen that latest Unreal demo with the real world lighting, that stuff is super cool. But I'm not. I used to play video games, but I'm not into that world anymore. I really appreciate what's happening from a design perspective with architecture in Unreal. But again, I'm not really trying to go back down that road necessarily. I want to see how Unreal can help with what I'm doing now, but I don't really want to make that type of art currently that is like world building, classic VFX driven stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. A lot of our participants are just learning about the world of design, the world of CG, the world of compositing throughout the 6 program. What are some suggestions in which you can offer our wonderful participants on how to share their story at the very initial stages, become storytellers, on their own?
I would say, like, it's a tough question, but you really want to. I think it's kind of everybody is going to figure that out for themselves to a degree, but you really want to. You just want to be prolific and not care about what you posted last week or last month. You want to. I'm guilty of. I'm not doing this right now. I unfortunately am too busy to be worried and concerned about my presence online because I'm just working all the time. But if I was in your position right now where I'm young, I would be trying to learn something fast and create my own version of what I just learned and then post it and be done with it. I think it's important right now for you guys I saw all the work that you guys are doing, and it's all fine, it's great, but you guys got to really push. And if you guys want to explore 2D animation, you need to get a trial version of Harmony, a program like Harmony, and literally just do a trial version of that. My friend who, he's, as old as me, we're old men now, I guess, but he just picked up Harmony. He lives in the woods by himself. He just picked up Harmony, and he showed me an animation that he did last week. And it's like, if he can do it, as this old guy living in Pennsylvania in the woods by himself, then you guys can definitely pick this stuff up with your really fast, quick, responsive brains. You guys can pick this stuff up and create really interesting stuff right now. The key for me and the key for you guys is to narrow your focus on a specific task at hand. I think that's the most important thing, is just to, okay, I want to do some 2D animation. I want to figure out how to do it right. I'm going to do 10 tutorials, and then I'm going to make my own project with this thing. And then you post that on Instagram. And if it's fun and you want to do it again, then you do another version. And then you post that on Instagram. And then you become slightly better with each chip away at that project, And I think that's important. Like, you gotta figure out what moves you and motivates you, what inspires you, what makes you hit the like button, what makes you follow it on Behance. And then you gotta start figuring out how to make that yourself. So I think it comes down to really looking at Behance and looking at these websites and figuring out what inspires you, because then once you do that, but I hate to say these social media things, it's more also look at the older versions of Behance and Instagram, which are just art. It's art. It's like things online. You know, everything is online now, but like what art moves you? Go to a museum. What does a Cy Twombly do for you, who's a a fine artist? How do these things really? What are the things that move you? Is it like, is it classical art? Is it impressionist art? How do those all these things? How do they move you? And if you figure out ways to allow them to come into your mind, you can create your own art and your own thing and own it and take ownership of it and then figure out how to make something else from that.
Yeah, you bring up a really great point because recruiters from different companies also like to look at traditional artwork as well. So if you're a really great illustrator or you're a really great sculptor, which you are, Eric, as well,
Thank you.
that's something that, a lot of recruiters will like to see as you develop your portfolios, because if you have the eye, that often translates digitally.
Yeah, it's true. Like it's super important. I mean, what you just said is extremely important, and I think you don't have to be the best at everything, and it's probably not going to be good for you to even try to be the best at everything. It's probably a waste of time. But what I would say is, you should investigate as much as you can, and then figure out where you land from that. And I was going to go somewhere else with that, but I'm kind of drawing a blank at this point because I think it's just as simple as that. It's just a matter of really figuring out what it's going to be for you, what's going to move you. One thing I was going to say is, in animation, you don't have to be the best animator to make a really clever piece of animation. It could be very, very funny or interesting, but it's really bad animation. I mean, this is like meme world 101. Like, this is what's happening on Reddit. But like, I think you can be really, really clever and interesting if you're focusing on the story. So some of you guys might be really good storytellers. Some of you guys might be really good illustrators. Some of you guys might be really good animators. Some of you guys might be really good lighters, 3D artists, whatever. Just figure out where your skill sets are. You don't have to be an amazing artist to be an amazing artist in this industry. What I mean by that is, you don't have to be a great, art like person who can draw. You don't have to draw the best. You don't have to illustrate the best. You can be an interesting person in this industry without those skills, because so much of this industry relies on technical information.
Mm-hmm. So Mikhail asks, and I'm going to totally put you on the spot with this question as well. How do you make sure your work is unique as an artist and not become a copy? He was mentioning that he's currently using Instagram, and he's now seeing artists on Instagram that make work similar to his own. So how do you set yourself apart from the rest?
I think right now, since you guys are young, really young, I wouldn't worry about that. I would worry more about, I think you need to focus on your own creative and what your identity is. But right now, since you guys are so young, you guys should be really focusing on execution and really making something creative. Like, there's always going to be people who make similar art to you, but why would yours stand out is the question. Yes, it comes down to what you're making and your identity, but is what you're making even close to what you like to make right now? And I think if it's not there yet, like for instance, if you want to sculpt a dragon or a character, say, there's a lot of people doing that right now. There's a huge amount of people on Instagram that are posting amazing character pieces with ZBrush and action hair and great clothing and etc. But that's not going to stop me from making my art, because I look at that and I appreciate it and I see where their pitfalls were, and I watch their tutorials or their making ofs, and I look at it. But I'm not concerned about the fact that they got to the finish line before me, or I'm making a piece that's literally so close to what they're making. That doesn't bother me because I made it from my own volition. So I think you guys should be in a position where you shouldn't be worried about making art that looks like other people's art right now, or having too many carbon copies of everything. That's been the case since the beginning of humanity. Just focus on making something that you're pleased with right now, and as you get better at the craft, you'll be able to figure out how to depart from the status quo.
Yeah, that's pretty well said. There's a book out now, I think, called Steal This Book or Steal This Art.
Oh yeah.
How artwork is often recycled.
Yep. Always.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it as well.
Yeah.
Crystal was mentioning, looking back at your earlier work, would you have made any changes to your current skills? What would you have done differently going back in time, basically?
If I could do it all over again, I probably would have learned Cinema 4D earlier on. I really like Cinema 4D, and I'm learning it as we speak right now. But I think Cinema 4D is a bit more of a liberating program to be creative in. Maya is great if you do want to do these bigger projects, but Cinema 4D I think is a program that allows you to really be free of what is considered traditional pipeline. It's a bit more autonomous. So that's one thing I would do, because Maya does kind of steer you into team-based exercise and projects. That's pretty finite, but go, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's quite specific, and I think that's great, because I'm noticing a lot of designers and computer graphics artists in the industry are all trying to learn Cinema 4D just because there are a few more shortcuts that they're really excited about.
Yep, it's true.
Houdini
as well.
Oh yes, actually, Houdini is another great software.
Yeah.
Any advice on enhancing one's personal projects? That's something that Christian was asking.
You gotta keep hammering. Like I'll put it this way. Everything I've done in my life, I'm a little bit bigger now. I got bigger over the last couple of years because I started working out. And I used to be really skinny, like really, really skinny. When I was at the mill, I was probably really skinny. But it's taken like 3 years for me to actually see any type of results on what I'm doing with my body. Whether it be running, a good example is I ran 2 half marathons last year. I ran 10 miles a couple weeks ago. And what I mean by this is that it's taken me so long to build up to these achievements, if I can call them achievements. Some people run crazy amounts of distance, but for me, it's my personal experience and it's my personal growth. For me, anything that I'm doing, whether it be mental, physical, art, work, whatever it is, you have to keep going at it. You have to keep going at it. Any of you guys that do work out now, as you guys probably know how hard it is to be able to do a handstand or a pull-up even, or 10 pull-ups or anything, no matter what it is. Reading books, for example, doing anything that you want to succeed at and be successful at requires constant repetition. If you guys have ever read Malcolm Gladwell's, I think it's, 10,000 hours? I forgot what it's called. I don't have the book in front of me, but Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about the 10,000 hour rule and how it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at anything. So you look at these people who are in the NBA, you look at these people who are playing the violin at an opera here in the city, like people who have been focused so much on a particular craft, the guitar, whatever it is that you really, really love, they are hammering every single day at that craft. And I think for everybody, the only takeaway that you can have for anything is to know that you have to put the work in. My brother is a fine artist, and he's been picked up by a really amazing gallery here in New York. But he has been practicing and doing art for 2 decades now. And it's something that he has fought for every single day. And it's like every single day is just art, making art. The same for me, it's just I'm doing it digitally. So that's the only thing I would stress really, is that you have to really, really keep going. Like you have to really, really just keep pushing.
Yeah, repetition is key, and establishing routine is key, or finding a form or a routine that works for you.
Yeah, I would recommend one book actually, if I have it up. I don't know if I have it though. I do. Can I make a book recommendation?
Absolutely, please do. I think our participants would really appreciate that.
Okay, this book is awesome. This book is called Manage Your Day Today. It's a pretty small book. It's great, but it's just like, it's about a guy who was a writer, and he's talking about how he built a routine because he wasn't creating what he wanted to, but it's like he just basically, it's kind of a self-help book. It's totally a self-help book, but it's super, super awesome because this book made me buy an hourglass and literally put headphones on and work for an hour without interruption. It's like there's things that I'm doing from this book that I still, try to adhere to today. But I think it's an important book because if you guys can carve out some time in your day to just really focus on your work, you'll have a better opportunity of making it and becoming what you want to do in this industry. If some of you guys want to make music videos, you know, you want to go out there and shoot music videos. Some of you guys want to make, you know, work on the Avengers. Some of you guys want to work, you know, make whatever. It's like, in order to get there, you have to put the hours in now to get to that point, you know. Some of you guys might want to direct a TV show for Netflix, you know. Anything is possible.
Awesome. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that, and I appreciate that book recommendation. So final question. This is a really, really most important one, I think, at this time, and in this present moment. You know, we're kind of experiencing very heavy times. Not kind of, we are experiencing very heavy times, and you know, I'd like to acknowledge that, you know, our hearts are heavy. What is some advice that you can offer our participants during these disheartening times amid the pandemics that we are all experiencing?
It's tough because we all know people who have been affected by this. You know, it's not fake. This is a very, very real situation that we're all in. You know, so I think it's just it's really important for me, in my position, how I've responded to it is just to really focus on making myself better. And I've really spent a lot of time reading a massive amount of information, from historical books about, you know, U.S. history, for example, world history, to all through like a lot of journalism news right now, to you know, just really kind of figuring out what to make of all of this. And I think for me, when in times like this, the best way you can respond is by being quiet and listening and learning, unless you do really feel like you have a position in it to kind of engage on. For me, I've been very much a listener, because nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's real anymore. Like, there's just so much chaos in the world. You know, it's like we have to kind of just put your head down and observe. And that's where I've been to a degree.
Yeah, what you said really resonates with me, so thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, it's been a really special time. We're going to resume our regular programming, but, you know, it was such a pleasure to be able to share the space with you. All of our participants have referenced that you've shared such invaluable insight, and we really appreciate you being here. We know how busy you are and how important your time is, so it really means a lot to have you.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I hope you guys took something from it, and hopefully we can do this again at some point.
Definitely, we'd love that. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
We'll
Awesome.
online.
Yeah, I'm gonna get back to my actual stuff now. So thanks again for having me, and I hope to see you guys again at some point.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.